When they said to me, I'm sorry, Miss Henderson, your son didn't make it, I saw myself lose my mind.
Yeah.
The sound that I made was a sound of insanity. But I know that God stabilized me literally in seconds. So I know the fragility of a mind and how you can just snap like that.
Yeah.
Having your complete world turn upside down.
In seconds. So, you know, I understand how that can happen to someone.
Hey, pod people. Welcome to this week's episode of
Why Do People Do That?
We are very excited to have our guest today, Empress. Thank you so much for being here.
Welcome, Empress.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so if you can take a moment to share with our viewers and our listeners who you are, what you do, tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Sure.
And where we can find you.
Awesome. Well, I am Elder Empress Henderson. I'm an ordained minister. I have a podcast. It's titled Faith Walk, Life Talk, and it's an unconventional method of me spreading the gospel. My focus is always talking to women in my age group, but women in general. We talk about women in the Bible and how their lives relate to our lives, just so that we can see that we mirror the women in the Bible. We're all sisters in this game of life. I'm a mother. I have 2 sons. I'm married to a wonderful husband. We've been married for, in July, 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah. You can find me on all social media platforms. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on TikTok.
Okay. So that's all with the same name?
You can find my Instagram handle is Faith Walk Life Talk. Mm-hmm. You can find me on Facebook as Empress J. Armstead-Henderson, my whole full name.
Okay.
And then you can find me on TikTok under Faith Walk Life Talk.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So I am excited to have you here because I think this is a very interesting conversation that we can have. We do talk a lot, Heather and I, with a variety of different guests about a lot of different topics that really are unique to women, things that women face. I find it, obviously, as a woman, I have got a connection to it.
Absolutely.
Well, right?
Yes.
We get
I'm
it.
a woman also.
We are all identifying female here.
Yes.
So I'd love to kind of really find some sort of a connection. You know, I'm thinking, as you're speaking, I'm thinking how fascinating it is that the human condition is the human condition, whether it be today or 1,000 years ago.
Absolutely.
Right? If we go all the way back to Bible times, and I don't even know how many thousands of years ago that was, you would be the expert in that, not me.
I wouldn't say an expert. I would say I'm an ever-learning student.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but we can settle about 2,000-3,000
Okay.
years. Can we settle?
That's a long
Okay.
time.
Yeah, that's a very long time.
So to talk about human beings and women, a few thousand years ago compared to today, and find the similarities, I think is so interesting.
Yeah.
Right. And not only is
Absolutely.
that so interesting, but when we talk about things like trauma and pain and emotion, and even when we think about things like generational trauma,
Absolutely.
right? A lot of who we are today really comes from thousands of years worth of pain and trauma and experience.
Most certainly.
Yeah.
Most certainly. That is my endeavor, to show a reflection. Like, there's nothing new under the sun. Most of the things that we've experienced, someone else has already experienced it, and we can learn from their past traumas or their triumphs. And so that's what my endeavor is to show and highlight to women, you're not in this alone. Someone has gone through trauma. Someone has gone through hurt. Someone has gone through disappointment. Someone has been maligned, and so, I think that when we see, particularly in the Bible, many of us, we gloss over a lot of the women. A lot of the times, I like to highlight the women that we don't really know. Like we know Eve.
Characters.
Right. We know Eve. We know Esther.
Yes.
You know, like those are like names that you would hear, right? Yes. But we don't typically hear about Arizba.
No.
You don't hear about maybe you may not have heard of Rebecca. So we've highlighted these women. Rebecca dealt with infertility. Mm-hmm. And so we highlight that in the podcast. What does that look like? Women have been going through the difficulty in having to have children for thousands of years. And
that's
so,
crazy.
yeah.
So tell us about Rebecca. Because that's really, I think, an interesting topic. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to and probably want to hear about, right? Tell us about, a biblical woman, a leader, I guess, from thousands of years ago, and what her story is, how it affected her, and how did she handle it?
So Rebecca has an interesting story because she evolves. So Rebecca is the wife of Isaac, who's the son of Abraham. Mm-hmm. So I
actually know these people.
You know these people.
I do.
Okay.
I'm like, Hebrew school.
Yes. See, it's all coming together.
It's all coming back. Well, go ahead.
So, when we look into in the story, Abraham sends his servant to look for a particular woman for his son. Mm-hmm. And as the servant is praying for there's certain signs and characteristics he's looking for, he finds this woman that's feeding and tending camel. So she shows like characteristics of being a hard worker, and she's a beautiful woman. So she agrees to marrying Isaac. Mm-hmm. They begin with this absolutely beautiful love story. Mm-hmm. But it takes a turn because Rebecca for 20 years is unable to conceive. Mm. And we do know in biblical times that a woman's value is connected to having children, right? Mm. So she becomes bitter at the fact that she's not able to conceive. But she ultimately does conceive, and she is noted as having twins. And the Bible says that she has these twins, Esau and Jacob, and we all know about Esau and Jacob, right? But the Bible says that she loved Jacob, that Isaac loved Esau, but she loved Jacob. And so we did a part 2 on Rebecca because it was interesting that you go through a season of your life unable to have children. You get blessed to have twins, and you only have the capacity to love one. So we talk about child favoritism. Mm-hmm. And so what does that look like? Mm-hmm. And many parents will say, I love them all the same. But if you ask the children, they will say, my parents absolutely have a favorite. Mm-hmm. And they, in most cases, the siblings can identify who they feel the favorite is.
They usually think it's the other sibling.
Right. That's what every now and then you'll hear someone says, I'm the favorite. Yeah. But that's very rare. It's always.
Usually they think it's the other one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's
totally cannot relate to this. As an only child,
you're an only child.
It's all about her, and it was all about me.
So then so that must feel really good. I don't know what that's like. I'm the oldest. I'm an only daughter. Yeah. But I was only the only child for 13 months. So I don't even remember being an only child. So we talk about these similarities. We can all identify with child favoritism. We can identify with infertility. Mm-hmm. We had a topic that we dealt with in an episode where we talked about Rizpah. And Rizpah is someone who watched her children being killed, and she silently protested the way they were treated. Mm-hmm. And so I identified with that because I lost my child almost going on 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so I may have read about her, but she just jumped out at the pages when I read her story.
What about her story? And I'm so sorry for your loss, by the way.
Thank you. Well, Rizpah, the fact that she was able to move past the pain and find purpose in it. Mm-hmm. And so in her story, Rizpah watches her sons their lives being taken for something that they did not do.
Yeah.
Their lives they had to pay a ransom for the sins of their father. And she actually sits vigil and guards their bodies, the carcass, as it says, from beasts, the wild animals at night, the birds in the air. And so she sits there as they hang on from a tree for months. And if you're reading the story, it seems like it's a couple days that she's doing this. But when you study it and you do a deep dive, you come to find out that she actually sits there for about a few months, 4 to 6 months.
That sounds like absolute torture.
Horrible.
It is horrible.
But it was a purpose.
Yeah.
See, these sons were princes. And by law, they were supposed to be buried within 24 hours. Buried as royalty, and they were like forgotten about. And she realized, as long as I sit here, somebody's got to pay attention and something has to be done. And even though it took a long time, someone did pay attention. That woman is sitting there in the grave watching the remains of her son, guarding them, like fighting the birds away and fighting beasts away from the remains.
She was trying to spread awareness and protest.
In silent protest.
Yeah.
It resonated with me because after I came out of the fog of grief, I realized that my son's life had a bigger purpose. Even in death, the response to to the loss was bigger than just the loss to my family.
Yeah.
And I realized that there was a purpose in the pain. And so it compelled me and my family to form an organization, and we started a scholarship fund in his name. And we did, we're moving into advocacy for the way that his life was taken. And it was taken by a drunk driver. So we've done like the Mad Walk, and we've done different, aligned with different organizations to bring awareness to, this tragedy.
So there's a good possibility that his loss has saved somebody else's life.
Absolutely. And that's my endeavor.
Yeah.
So the podcast has had a wide range of a purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that the stories that you share, well, I would imagine resonate with so many people. And I think that there's probably, just so much validation in listening to a story of a human being who lived these experiences thousands of years ago and still feels so familiar to us. What's fascinating is while I'm listening to you, right? So to go back to Rebecca for a moment, and then I'd like to kind of talk a little bit more about, you and your journey, because there's, I think, something to be said there about positive reframing and resilience that could be a really great message to our viewers as well.
Sure.
But to go back to Rebecca for a moment. So Heather and I, maybe a month or two ago, we did it's not a bad thing. We did a podcast on mom guilt. And in this podcast about mom guilt, we talked about the roles of women and how this is something that has been passed on through generations. And we didn't go back 2,000 or 3,000 years. We only went back to like the 1950s. Okay. But we talked about the role of women and how we feel this need to be something that we are expected to be, which comes down through generations. And even though today our role is different because there's so many, dual, income households where the woman has to work. But even though we may be the breadwinners of our home and we're working full time and we're doing all of these other things that women thousands of years ago did not do, we still have not abandoned our post, right? Of I'm supposed to be the mother. I'm supposed to, be fertile. I'm supposed to procreate and give birth and nurture and do all of these things and protect. Right? Absolutely. If we're going to go now to RISPA. Right? Absolutely. It is my job to protect and to make sure that my children's names are heard and that they are treated fairly, right? The mama bear.
Absolutely.
Plus the need to be the mother, right? If I don't become the mother, then what am I? I don't know what purpose I serve. Right. And one of the things we talked about in this episode was how we get this like crazy cryptic message our whole lives that we're only allowed to respect and honor and love and cherish and take care of ourselves if it's in the purpose of needing to be there for the people who need us. Like the whole oxygen mask thing, right? Put that oxygen mask on before you put it on anybody else, because you need to be okay to take care of everybody else.
Absolutely.
But what if there's nobody with you on the plane? Then do you put the oxygen mask on just for you, right? We don't get that message. And so what's so interesting is that our role as women is passed down for thousands and thousands of years. And I would imagine that probably women today, on some level, we are who we are because of the women from 2,000 and 3,000 years ago and these situations that they've had.
But it gets passed down, but it keeps getting added on to with each different generation.
That's a good point. As you were, laying it out, yes and no is my answer.
Okay.
And here's why.
Tell me your thoughts.
Because if you go back to the 1950s and even a little bit back, so as you were talking and laying it out, I was reflecting about my grandmother, who had a very strong influence in my life. And when I think about some of the things that the expectations she set, like I got to a place where I was able to challenge that. Like, not so much. We are in a great place, women, to redefine what we want our lives to be, and we are in a good place to decide to put ourselves first and not feel guilty about it. Like it can be both and, right? It doesn't have to be either or.
It should be.
It doesn't right, but I mean we're at a place. I think we're at a place of enlightenment where we carried unnecessary guilt for far too long, and when I lost my son, part of grief is, was I a good mother? Did I maximize the time that I had with him?
Yeah.
You can get into a weaved web of feeling guilt.
Yeah. Guilt often comes with grief.
It does. It's part of the process, right? Yep. And so, through therapy and a lot of prayer, a lot of time reflecting, I refuse to take on the guilt of anything. You. I met this guy, and I believe nothing is ever wasted, even when you come into contact with certain people. And I was in Baton Rouge, and this was last year, and this is a pivotal moment in my grief process, because this is where I can identify where I was being healed. Like I wasn't in the lowest place anymore. And I was in a hotel. I was there because I was at some kind of workshop for moms who had lost their children, but they lost their children through the gun violence. And I was a part of this program. And for some reason, the guy in the hotel, the bellhop, we started talking. I explained to him what I was there, and he said, you know what? The worst hurt is not grief. The worst hurt is guilt. When you lose someone and you didn't maximize the time you had with them. And so that gave me permission to not be guilty, because I knew that my son loved me. I knew that he knew that I loved him. And I knew that out of all of the people in the world, God chose me to be his mom. And so that was a special assignment, right? So there was no room for guilt, because there was something that was specially orchestrated and ordained before I was even born. So guilt happens when you don't tell the people that you love them. When you think of someone and you're too busy that you don't pick up the phone to call and check up on them. But when you know that when that last moment you have on earth with someone, that they knew where you stood with them and you knew where they stood with you, of course you miss them and you long for them, but the guilt is never there. So as women, I think we've carried guilt that was not really ours to carry.
I agree.
Yeah, it really wasn't. And even when my children were young, I gave myself time to have me time. And in the past, I used to own a tea business, and it was called Empress Royal Teas. And it was birthed out of having two sons, and I don't know if you guys have children or boys, but they are full of energy. Mm-hmm. I had two sons, two dogs. They were all in sports, so I had teammates over all the time. My husband was like, where's my other sock? And, he was pulling, the children was pulling, the dogs was running. And one day I just sat and had a cup of tea. Yeah. While it was all happening. And it gave me permission to take a little time for myself.
Good for you.
And so we have to understand that what we've been indoctrinated to do as women and what has defined us, we get to redefine it. You can still be a good mother. You can still be a good wife. You can still have the career, and you can still be good to yourself.
Yeah.
Which is the message we get, but I think it's so hard to internalize that and live that. Like, I think, on paper we know that, and everyone will read a good self-help book that'll talk about that, but actually being able to give yourself permission to do something just for yourself, to just sit there and drink your tea and watch your house spinning around and not feel like I have to fix this right now.
It is a process.
Being an acceptance of what is and just drink the tea.
Yeah,
right?
It is a process. But you know what? When you're doing it, after the second time you put the teacup to your mouth, you're like, this isn't so bad. Mm-hmm. The children are living. Mm-hmm. He found the sock.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not your job to find the sock.
Right, You
don't have to fix everything.
Everything's going to be all right.
Yeah.
And so you come to a place where you just kind of become aware of that.
I think guilt in some ways for us as women comes from this idea that we're supposed to control everything. Mm. We're supposed to in some way fix, nurture, take care of, find, make better. It's my responsibility. And so if we can move away from that and accept that everything is not within our control or within our power. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you did in your healing journey, right, through your grief. And think that maybe you started out not really knowing where that fit for you. And at some point you accepted this was not within my control.
Absolutely. I mean, the grief journey, and I'm still going through that.
That's a lifetime.
Journey, it's going to be a life.
Yeah.
Some days you feel good and you feel like you've taken milestone steps, and then days will come and you feel like you've taken 10 steps backwards. But in the grief journey, you discover a lot of things about yourself. Especially when you go through therapy. You start talking about all kinds of things. For me, when my son passed away, he passed away months before I turned 50. Mm-hmm. And I was at a place in my life where I was getting ready to go into a whole nother phase. Yeah. My children were grown. My husband and I were in a groove. Yeah. And I was looking forward to just turning 50. And I had even dubbed it Fabulous in 50 or Fierce in 50 and all of this stuff. And I just felt like the hard part was over.
Yeah, whole new era. Time for you.
Yeah, the hard part was beyond. I had done, everything that, I could do to bring my children to where they were. My youngest son was away at college, and it was just like I was an empty nester. We're good. And I was blindsided. It was like the sun was shining. I went behind a dark curtain, and things went dark. Mm-hmm. And it took probably weeks for me to my mind to wrap around the fact that this was really not just a dream. Mm-hmm. This was not just a nightmare. I was actually living it. And when I look back on everything, I realized there's part of it I don't even remember. People will say, oh, I was there, and I don't even remember,
I'm sure you disassociated a lot.
Probably.
Just to kind of survive something that was
absolutely
so painful that it didn't even feel real.
Absolutely. So, and I decided that I would go into therapy because I needed something to help. Like I couldn't just be here like this. And so therapy began to open up a lot of things for me. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just therapy, but my faith was like I locked into my faith. Mm-hmm. So what does that look like? It looks like prayer, intense prayer, spending a lot of time in prayer. It looks like listening to worship music. It looks like surrounding yourself around people who are like-minded in faith to speak into your life, encouraging words, praying for you.
Yep.
All of these things, that's what it looks like. And I stayed in like almost a cocoon of just that for a long time. I did not really socialize because I didn't want to deal with people acting funny around me because they didn't know how to handle what I was going through.
That happens. They don't know what to say.
They don't know what to say, or they avoid me, and
they're afraid, right? Because it's too real. If it happened to you, it could happen to them, and people want to avoid what they can't regulate themselves around.
When you talk about control.
Yep.
So, getting back to women, we can't really get too far away from that because that's part of our innate nature to be nurturers, to kind of control the dynamic of the household. That's like what we do, right? Yeah. But again, it can be both and. Like there are times where we can control and then we can kind of loosen the reins and let things be, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that it's more survival of the fittest. It's like a survival method because sometimes we control until we're out of control, right? We're so in control till we're just simply out of control.
That's what happens.
That's what happens.
When we try to control something with all of our might, with this unrealistic expectation that we have this power.
That we don't have.
We don't have it. So we spiral completely out of control. Yes. And this is when you see anxiety and depression and OCD and things like that that are not, they're maladaptive, right? It's not a healthy way.
Right. Absolutely. So when we realize that we don't have the control that we're trying to portray we have, I think that there's a little bit of freedom in that. So and
acceptance.
Yeah. Right? Even when your children are like young adults, when you tell them at 5 years old, go to bed, here's your food, this is what you eat. Everything is in your control. When they turn 21 and they're not doing it the way you envision them to do it.
And they're not.
And they have their own opinion.
I've got a few of those.
And you, right. It's so that when you talk about trauma, that's traumatizing when your child is like, no, I'm not going to finish school. I think I'm going to just try to be an actor. And you're like, wait, what? Are you kidding me? So when you realize that and children are the first, teachers to remind you are really not in control. They have their own minds, their own, goals for their lives. And my son, Xavier, that passed away, God rest his soul, he was one who had his own path and it did not align to what I had. And I had a clear vision of what his life would be. But he had other thoughts. So,
and we have to allow it, right? At some point, right, our child ends and we begin, or we end and they begin, right? We are not, they're not extensions of us.
You know what? When you look at it, they are, because I was very much, I'm going to do things my way and I have my own path. And so sometimes they're just a reflection. They're a mirror of who you are.
Sometimes they are.
Right? So, so he was one that showed me myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when we have to really give ourselves permission to not always feel like we have to have it all together, have all the control, have all the say. And when I realized that I didn't have to, I felt more freer.
Yeah.
And I think that started to become very clear after I turned 50. When you become more self-aware, you're like, I'm okay with not having all the control.
It is very liberating.
It is.
When you kind of accept that certain things are out of your control, that you can't fix it all. You can't do it all.
Absolutely.
And it's okay.
And it's all right.
Right. And that we can experience hard things, right? We can tolerate distress. and we can tolerate pain. A lot of our need for control comes from this belief that we can't handle what is hard. And once we really kind of step into our strength and our resilience, and we say, even when something is hard, we can still tolerate it and experience it, right? That's when we start to lean into acceptance.
Wow.
So we can sit back and drink the tea. And say, I don't have to find the sock. And I can accept that maybe my son's life served a different purpose than I wanted it to. And this is hard and it's painful, but where can I find a new path here?
Right.
For him and in my relationship with him, right? Based on where he is now.
Yeah.
These are hard things.
It is hard. It's doable. I never asked to grieve so openly. As I said, I am an ordained minister. So people are always looking to you to have a word of comfort for them. Yeah. And when it's you, then they're looking to you to see if you're actually walking out what you say. Yeah. So my grief was very public. And it was nothing that I would have asked for. Surely when, I was maturing in my faith, I would ask God I want to be of use for your glory. But when you ask that, you don't know what you're asking for, right? You don't know what that's going to look like when he answers. And so now I understand that I'm graced for this walk. Yeah. And what that means is that you could never do this. I could never imagine living with something that was a part of me out. I never could imagine this. I could not even have, my mind could never conceptualize that I would be here without one of my children. Yeah. I know that just to sit here and talk to you about it, I'm graced for it. It's an assignment. And it's why I'm living. So now my life has a whole different purpose. Yeah. It's not just to represent the memory of my oldest son, but it's also to be here fully present for my youngest son. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. So thank you for sharing it. I really appreciate you being vulnerable to share. And I think it really is extremely helpful and healing for people to listen to, because what you are projecting here, right, into the room and what you are showing us is resiliency. Thank you. And sometimes that is hard for people to find, right? Sometimes it's hard for people in the wake of some pain. And we know that the loss of a child is really the most painful thing that anybody can really experience. And it's what a lot of people fear the most. Not everybody is able to do what you have done, that you are able to step into acceptance, that you are able to put a positive reframe on the experience and see its purpose, and that you are able to use the experience to save other lives and help other people and step into faith. Yes. Right? So to kind of show you what I mean in terms of where some people can't do that. My mother lost a child. So sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Which means I lost a sibling. Right. But this isn't about me. This is about my mother. We talked about me in another podcast. Okay. Okay.
You and your broken wing.
Me and my broken wing.
Oh, yes. But you're still flying.
I am. And I'm here trying to help as many people as I can, because that's who I became. I stepped into that role. Yes. My mother went the complete opposite direction. I wish that she hadn't, because she lived a life of pain. Wow. Yeah. She turned away from religion. She turned away from spirituality. She turned away from faith and God. And so I grew up in a household, despite the fact that I was taught that I was Jewish, and this is a Jewish household, and I went to Hebrew school. I got a very confusing mixed message because my mother was extremely angry with God. It was sort of a double message, because it was, there's no such thing as God, but I'm angry at God. Right. So which is it? Right. Right. It was whatever she needed it to be in that moment. Yeah. But there was a lot of, F religion, F God. Why would God allow a 5-year-old little girl to get sick and die? Wow. And she she abandoned spirituality and faith so much. And my father did the opposite.
Wow.
My father turned to spirituality. He sort of made up his own religions and his own
found all sorts of things.
Read all sorts of books, and he found something that made sense for him.
Okay.
I leaned more into what my father leaned into, and I found my own beliefs, probably more aligned with a lot of the things that he believed. And now I definitely moved more towards that, stream of what's my purpose.
Okay.
And, who can I be, through the wake of this pain? And if she died and I lived, then what's my purpose? And so I think my father and I sort of moved towards that resiliency of positive reframe and purpose. And my mother absolutely could not until the day she died.
Wow.
Could not.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I've learned some things, some intimate characteristics about God in my grief.
Yeah.
Because he created us, he knows about every single intricate detail. He knows our heart. So some people are actually mad at God and never admit it, will never admit it. Your mother did.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But he can handle that because he knows the heart. There's a scripture that says, man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. So you can't hide your emotions from God anyway.
Yeah.
But for me, I started searching scriptures that spoke to where I was. And I found two scriptures that I meditated on for the last 3 years, and I still am. And one is found in Psalms 147, verses 3. And it says that he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. And then in Psalms 34, it says he's near to the brokenhearted. So he talks about people who have broken hearts.
Yep.
And so I said, God, my heart is broken.
Yeah.
And because you're God, I'm going to put the onus on you to heal it. And so I would read the scripture all the time. You said in your word that you can heal a broken heart. And so I'm trusting you to heal it. And I heard an audible response. And what I would tell listeners who are going through grief, that if you're angry with God, he can handle it.
Yep.
If you have a question, God has an answer. And he will give you an answer that you can live with. It may not be the answer you expect, but he will give you an answer you can live with. And for me, I wanted to know, there were 5 people in the car. And I'm very well known as an intercessor, which is someone who people seek out to pray for them, for their needs, for their hurts. And I said, I'm praying for all these people. Why was it that my son was the only one in the car killed?
That's
the
so
only
hard.
one.
Yeah.
And the Lord said to me that he was always mine. And he was on loan when I gave him to you. And because he was mine, I had the right to take what was mine. And I could live with that because now I know where he is. If he's not with me, I would rather him be with God.
And so that gave you comfort.
So I was comforted, right? So, unfortunately, people get through they get stuck in the 5 steps of grief.
Yes, they do.
And so for me, I don't judge that. I pray for that. I pray that because we're human, unfortunately, we will always experience some sort of grief or loss, right? And so that's where my heart is tender the most for those who have felt, whether it's a child or a parent or a friend, whatever your loss is, that God can bring you through the process of grief so that you can be whole and healed on the other side. I believe that God was able to do that for me. And I believe that God can do that for anyone who just can trust that he can do that. Is open to that.
Yeah.
And so, you have a lot of people that's angry. I don't judge it. Again, my prayer is that they can get through that phase of anger and find some kind of comfort.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if somebody is open and willing to do that work.
Yeah.
and to find what is keeping them stuck. What I find as a therapist doing a lot of grief work, what keeps someone stuck in the phases or stuck in anger and not moving forward, and grief is a lifelong journey. And what I always tell people is the phases don't have to go in any particular order.
Right.
They're all over the place.
Returning back to other ones, and it's
go in circles, right? And so you have to not have a specific expectation that there's a right way to do it.
Right.
Or a timeline.
Or I should be over it. I should be better by now. I should be feeling better. None of that is true. But what I find working with people, what complicates grief, right? Because when we talk about people who are stuck, somebody like my mother, they get stuck. It's complicated grief. And it's usually a blocking belief that gets in the way. And so for you, you didn't have that blocking belief. It sounds like in the very beginning, you started to a little bit like with your guilt. Did I spend enough time? Did I? And you very quickly caught on that and you corrected it and you moved through it with resilience, right?
I don't want to give myself credit for that. I give all glory to God. I didn't correct anything because I didn't know what I was doing. What I know is this to be true. God had also spoke to me audibly at the beginning of the pandemic, and he spoke to me to gather with some friends to start a prayer call. And at that time, we were gathering on a conference call every night, praying through the pandemic. We were all quarantined. People were dying. People were sick. We were all afraid. We didn't know what was happening.
It was a scary time.
It was a very scary time, but this is what God had given me, and we were doing it. And people started gravitating by word of mouth on this prayer call every single night, upwards of 125 people without any marketing, just word of mouth. And people were on the call in Idaho and Iowa and places I've never been, just by word of mouth. That's how powerful it was. I believe God was preparing me all those years before for what was getting ready to happen in my life. I had no idea. The day my son was killed, I had a great day. I said it out loud. I was at the pumpkin patch. And if you remember October 29th, 2022, it was 80 degrees. You may not remember that, but I remember every detail.
I'm sure.
Yep.
And I went to the pumpkin patch with my cousin, who's a young adult, but she wanted to make hearts out of the pumpkins for Instagram. And I went. And I had the best time. And I kept saying to myself, I am having the best time. I'm drinking apple cider. I bought me a sunflower and other stuff. I come home. I say to my husband, I had a great day. Like, this was really a nice day. It wasn't planned. And somebody called and said, Xavier was in a car accident. In my mind, we get up, we get in the car. Oh, he probably broke his arm. Let's go get our boy. We go in the hospital. We go in the emergency. They direct us into trauma. Nothing in my mind ever said, you're in the trauma unit. I'm sitting there waiting for my son to come out in a sling. And they come out and they started telling me the dire state that he was in. And what do you want us to do? And this is like where it goes dark, right?
Disbelief, right? This
utter like out of body experience. So I say all that to say that I was already prepared through all of the prayers, because I believe that when you connect with God, you may pray for something today that's stored up in heaven for down the line. That I was praying for strength that I was going to need in 2022 when I started it in 2020. And that's what it was that was able to carry me until today. And even throughout those early days, I was still praying. I was still getting on the prayer line. Maybe I wasn't leading the prayer, but I was immersed in it. Somebody was praying.
Well, the experience that you had and how you handled it and where you were led at that time, right, brought you right into being able to handle what was being thrown at you.
It was just like plugging into a power source. The minute I plugged in was the minute the power started to generate that I needed to get through what was happening. So for those, like I said, people have to find what it is that they need to tap into to get through the seconds and then the minutes, the hours, the days. For me, I couldn't even fathom what was I going to do tomorrow. It just had to be getting through today.
Right now.
Right now.
Yep.
So when people ask, are you okay? I'm okay right now. I don't know what I'm going to be by 10 o'clock.
Sometimes it's okay to not be okay.
It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah,
but I'm not going
to be okay.
And you know what else is okay? To not say, okay, his birthday is Thursday. My son's birthday is going to be. I'm not saying Thursday I'm going to be sad.
Yeah.
You know, some people have markers. I'm going to be sad on Christmas.
Yes.
I'm going to be sad on their birthday. Grief doesn't work like that.
It does if we set it up
If
to.
we can become professional grievers.
Fulfilling
it's the anniversary of their death, so I have to be miserable
So I have
today.
to be, right.
It's a ritual we set up for ourselves.
Absolutely.
By choice.
Absolutely.
100%. Yes.
And so, but if we take on the attitude day by day, I might not be having a good day today. It could be because of the weather.
Yeah.
Right? But tomorrow I might look at his picture and start laughing at a memory of a joke we shared. And it'll be perfectly okay. So I give myself permission to feel what I'm feeling in that moment and be okay with if I'm not feeling good in that moment. That's the days where I've learned how to say no and accept it, that no is a complete sentence.
It is.
No, I can't come. No, you can't come over.
Yeah.
No, you can't drain me with your problems today.
That's such a powerful sentence. I give myself permission to feel what I'm feeling right now.
Absolutely. So when I say we get to redefine what we take on and the pressures that we take on, I give myself the permission to understand what what I'm capable of handling today and what I'm capable of handling in that moment. And I may not be able to handle, certain things in that moment.
And that's
it's
okay.
That's okay.
It's okay.
Our power, right, is being able to sit in difficult emotions and experience them without the feeling like we need to run or flee from them.
Yeah.
To say it's okay that I'm sad in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's okay to cry.
It is absolutely necessary to cry when you need to cry.
And when you cry does not mean that you're not healed.
No, it's a somatic experience of an emotion that you need to experience, right? And so pay attention to what's happening for you, experience it, be curious about it and allow it. Let it pass through you.
Let it happen. Let it happen. And then once it happens, okay, I can get through. I can do whatever it is I need to do, you know. So that's how I process and learned how to adjust my life to what's happened. And then it's also not just my life. I have to, I'm always looking to see if my husband's okay. Men process grief very differently, And then I found out we were all trying to look out for each other more than look out for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, it's so much easier to take care of the person next to you, right?
Right.
Than yourself for so many reasons, right? Part of it is let me just dive into their emotion and their experience and see what I can do for them to distract from me.
A deflection, yeah.
And absolutely, part of it comes back to, as women, right, that being that nurturer, wanting to be the caretaker. Yes. Everyone comes first, oxygen mask, right?
Yes.
I have to take care of you. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of them are just old habits.
Yeah.
And old habits die hard.
Yeah.
So we have to just kind of reset and say, I'm doing it again.
Yep.
And having the awareness to be able to do that, to recognize that in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you, as your mother just kind of held on to the anger, how did that shift the dynamic of your family?
Well, I think the way it shifted the dynamic of the family is I felt as a child, and I was very young when I lost my sister. I was only 3.
Wow. Okay. So you were a baby.
Yes.
Okay.
So I really grew into this role of I have to take care. This is where I am as a therapist, right? I have to take care of everyone's feelings. Mom can't handle it, so we can't talk about it. Dad is in pain and suffering and struggling and needs to talk about it.
Okay.
So I'm going to have these private conversations with Dad. And I'm going to lean into his beliefs, and we're going to have this secret little connection, but we can't talk about it in front of Mom, right? Because Mom can't handle it.
Mom can't handle it.
We have to be delicate around Mom. And I think so my dad really had to kind of grieve in silence and on his own to protect her. And I think that for me, I didn't really get to grieve at all because I kind of grew up with this feeling of it's not my story, it's their story.
Right.
I got a lot of messaging like, you were so young, you don't remember. Not true.
You do remember.
I do remember.
Yes.
And so I think I took on that. We all kind of took on this role of protect Mom because Mom can't handle it.
Wow. So did you ever come to a place in your life where you processed what happened to you? That you carried all those years?
I processed. I didn't tell her.
You didn't tell her. So you never felt free enough to confront?
Not her.
No.
No.
Wow.
I've talked to my dad about it. I've talked to other family members about it. I've processed. But I never felt like I could process with her because she couldn't handle it. And so I kind of looked at it like I'm seeking to make myself feel better by looking for her validation and acceptance, but I know she can't give it. And I know that she loves me and she means well, but she didn't step into faith the way that you did.
Yeah.
She stepped into anger. And that is what she carried. I think for her, that was her loyalty to my sister. Okay. That was her loyalty to how dare you do this to my daughter. And you said before, God took your son and he was with God.
Yeah.
People said that to my mother.
And she got angry.
And she became infuriated. She doesn't belong to God. She belongs to me. She's my daughter.
Wow,
She's a little girl. She's 5 years old.
Yeah.
Who she doesn't know who God is. She knows who her mother is. She should be with her mother. My mother couldn't handle it. And so everyone just sort of, and so we just didn't talk about it.
Wow.
And that definitely affected me. And I think it affected my father. And it was really just a lot of, she was the broken link, right?
Yeah,
She was the weakest link.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our healing and our grieving really surrounded her needs more than ours. And so and my mom passed away a few years ago. And I have found since she passed that I have had the freedom to tell my story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't tell it before. Like I would not, there's no way I'd be having this conversation if she was alive.
While she was alive.
Because she'd be watching this podcast.
So
because she loves the shit out of me and she would support anything I did.
Yeah.
But there would be no way I'd be able to tell my grief story or talk about losing my sister. I couldn't even post about it on Facebook.
Wow.
Without her being like, oh, you had to go post that today and ruin my day.
Oh,
Picture of Laurie.
That's tough.
I could not. So I think that's where it brought in that dynamic in my family. It was like, we all have to sort of tiptoe around this woman suffering, this woman grieving, this woman stuck in complicated grief. And I think it was all rested in guilt that she could not resolve. And I think the reason she couldn't move into faith, because she did believe in God before this happened. I think the reason she couldn't move into faith, her blocking belief, which moved her away from faith, was her guilt.
My heart goes out to you because as a mother, I had to understand that I'm grieving as a mother. Yeah. But my son was grieving as he lost his only brother.
Yeah.
And he'll never have nieces and nephews. That dynamic, him being bullied by his bigger brother. Like whatever their brother dynamic was broken. And he had a whole different grieving process than I had.
For him too.
And so if I didn't allow him, I couldn't imagine him feeling like I can't grieve in front of Mom. So that means I have to carry this inside of me. The trauma of it already lives inside of us.
Yeah.
And then I can't really relieve myself of the grief of it. Must have been a lot for you.
It was.
Because there was a loss for you. Yes, mom lost something, but you lost a sister.
Yeah.
And even as a baby, not only did you lose a sister, but you probably didn't really understand what does that mean? Like, you know, at 3 years old, you're trying to explain to a small child where they're back in heaven. Like, you try to come up with a story that they can digest about.
She was sleeping.
My grandmother told me she went on a trip.
You see, so you
and I was
never
like, why would mommy and daddy let her go on a trip? Well, when is she coming back? She's not coming back.
She's not coming back.
Think about how terrifying that is.
Right.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And my father was like, don't tell her that. Lori didn't go on a trip. She's in heaven. And I was like, okay.
Well, what does that mean?
What is heaven?
Yeah.
And it's something I had to relearn every couple of years.
Sure.
Like as I went through different stages of development to process it with a better developed brain.
Wow.
But, you know, thank you for acknowledging and validating that for me.
Absolutely.
Because it was very confusing and scary growing up.
Sure, I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was.
Yep.
But look at you now.
Yeah.
You've taken that and you're helping people and you have such a far reach, you know, having these type of discussions. I always say nothing that you ever lived through or experienced is ever lost and it's never wasted.
Yeah.
So we don't understand why we go through certain things, but God knew that you would be reaching a lot of people because I'm sure that you've helped a lot of people.
I hope so.
If it's not this topic, and I'm sure in other topics you know that you have, you know, highlighted, you've helped people, you know, so, but you were the one that was able to deal with that situation, come out, mind intact, and use it, tunnel it to become a social worker to help other people.
It's a miracle.
Yes, it is. It is a miracle. It's a miracle that I didn't lose it because when they said to me, I'm sorry, Miss Henderson, your son didn't make it, I saw myself lose my mind.
Yeah.
The sound that I made was a sound of insanity.
I'm sure.
But I know that God stabilized me literally in seconds. So I know the fragility of a mind and how you can just snap like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Pain can do that to you.
From 1 minute, doing hearts with pumpkins to being insane.
Yes.
It's very real.
Having your complete world turn upside down.
In seconds. So, you know, I understand how that can happen to someone. I've seen people who are shells of themselves now because they've experienced a trauma that they could not recover from.
Yeah.
Which makes me so eternally grateful that my mind is intact.
Yeah.
I have a level of peace.
Yeah.
I understand what my assignment in life is. My child is doing well. He graduated last year this time, magna cum laude in school.
Congratulations.
And he had to
Beautiful.
deal with grief in school, away from home. And God was able to help him stay focused and to still matriculate and do it with honors. So my husband, he's doing well. We are all well. And so I'm eternally grateful for that.
And it's okay to be well.
Of course.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
Yes, I think that's where a lot of people get stuck when they lose somebody. Is it okay to be okay?
It is.
It absolutely is. Not being okay doesn't bring them back.
No.
Right? It's not what they want.
No.
Right?
No.
Absolutely not.
I think the biggest honor you can give your loved ones is to live life to the utmost, to the level of really showing, you know, showing that they were special to you. So when we have this basketball tournament, we do it, we'll have our third one in August. And we did it out of grief. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm a girl. I'm a girly girl. I love pink. I'm sugar and spice and everything nice.
You don't play basketball.
I don't play basketball.
With those nails.
No. My children, they play all kinds of sports. Lacrosse, basketball, football, whatever. And I would just I'd go out to the field. I'll let them see me. I would cheer for a few seconds and go back to the car.
Yeah.
Right? So, but my son loved basketball. And so we said, well, we'll do a basketball tournament in the park, one of the parks in Uniondale. That's where my children grew up. We raised our children there. And he'd always play basketball in this park. And so we rented out the park, and when hundreds and hundreds of kids came.
That's so nice.
And my cousin, so my son passed away in the end of October. So for Thanksgiving, she designed this T-shirt for everyone to wear for Thanksgiving dinner. And we made a T-shirt out of it. We sold that. We made all this money, and we were able to give out scholarships. We gave out 5 $1,000 scholarships to the Uniondale High School graduating students. We did that for 2 years in a row. And so this year will be the third. This is what I say, this is what I was born to do. You would think that I was some kind of big event planner and that I knew all these people from basketball programs. I knew none of this. God gave me the blueprint, and people have helped us without any push. What can we do? What can we sponsor? And we've been able to do this. And there's, when I'm in that moment and I see all of these children having a good time, and we're doing the tournament, we're raising the money, and all the people that have volunteered their time. And, it shows me that his life had such a great impact on the world. And he used to say, I know a lot of people, and I never thought that, I thought, yeah, sure you do. But all of these people that he touched, it's overwhelming, but it goes to show that there's so much more to the story. It's not about his death.
Yeah.
It's about his life and what we do with it.
Yeah.
Even though he's not physically here, the memory, every time we tell a joke, he loved to laugh. He loved to dance. He was just this lively people person that filled a room. And so we try to capture the essence of who he was.
Yep.
Every time we have an opportunity in different capacities. And that's what it really has been all about. That has really been the secret sauce to healing.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And his story inspires people to remember how important life is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To live life to the fullest. Don't waste a day. Live with no regrets. And so for me, when I tell someone I love them, I mean it. I make sure that they feel the emotions of everything that I say. When I say it, I look you in your eye, because I want you to know. I want you to know that when I hug you, you feel what I feel for you.
Going through an experience like you do, it makes you kind of realize how fleeting things are and the importance of living in the moment, enjoying that moment, making sure people know how important they are to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's about living without any regrets. Because regrets is more painful than death.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
You spoke a couple times about the feeling of awe and just that feeling. And I've been sitting back kind of watching this and starting my own kind of grief journey and watching and just being in awe of the way that you were able to kind of gracefully move forward and do something positive with this, not get stuck, and to kind of find meaning in it, both for yourself and for his life.
Yeah. It's work. I don't want anyone to take away and say, like, Puff, it happens, it was work.
Or that it should be easy, right? Remember that, people.
Yes,
it's not always easy, right?
But it's
usually
doable.
Isn't, but just because it's hard doesn't mean we can't do it, right?
It is doable.
Yep.
And that's called investing in yourself.
Yep.
I knew I was a people person. I love people. I love to talk. I love to laugh. I am a social butterfly. And so how was I going to live in a shell? I might as well have died if I was going to live like that. So God had to restore me.
Right. What would be the point? And that's not what your son would want.
Right. So
and that isn't going to help him.
That wouldn't help anyone. My husband, my child, So so I had to invest in myself to get back to myself. So even on my job now, I'm just back working. I went back to work in July. And they had given me the opportunity to work remote as long as I needed to. But because my personal goal and my personal journey was that I was healed, everything about me had to line up to what I was declaring.
Yep.
And so how healed are you if you're still in your Snuggie working behind closed doors, right? So I had to...
You're comfortable.
I'm comfortable, but I'm not facing the world.
Yeah.
And I had to have that conversation.
Yeah.
So I go in once a week now because maybe the day, I don't commit to the day I'm going to go in, because if I say I'm going to go in every Monday, well, maybe that Monday may not be a good day to be socialized. So I just committed to going in once a week where I get dressed. And I make sure I get dressed. I don't just, now you can dress down, right?
Yes.
But I get dressed because it's a personal journey for me.
Yep.
And I work with a passion that I probably didn't before, because it's all about getting back to where I was, because I feel like I lost some time. And so I want to get back to where I was when I was going to work. I was ambitious. I had goals, professional goals. Now, not so many professional goals, just to be able to function like I was, in a normal setting, being able to be around coworkers, be able to commute. And all of those things were very hard to do.
Yeah.
And I do it because every part of your healing is a step closer, but you have to take the step in order to move forward.
One step at a time, right? You are on that journey.
Absolutely.
You're still on it.
Yeah.
And where you'll be 2 years from now is different than where you are today, right? Because you are going to just keep going on the path you're on.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yep.
So thank you so much for sharing. I think that your story and the way that you view things and the way that you are handling it and the way that you kind of lean into it with faith is something that can be so helpful to people. So what I've learned, it is inspiring. So I think what we've learned today is that, through purpose, and finding purpose and allowing purpose and faith, even in the face of something so horrible, can really help us to move forward through our process and find joy and happiness in life.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here.
You ladies are delightful.
You as well.
Thank you.
Can you remind our viewers and listeners where they can find you in case they missed it in the beginning or don't want to rewind?
Absolutely. I'm out here.
I do.
I'm out here. I'm easy to find. You can find me on Facebook at Empress J. Armstead-Henderson. You can find me on Instagram at Faith Walk Life Talk. You can find me on TikTok at Faith Walk Life Talk. And shoot me a line, take a look at or listen to my podcast. I'm also on YouTube at Faith Walk Life Talk. I don't know how I forgot that. You can view.
That's important.
Yes, you can view some of the episodes on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. And so, take a listen and drop us a line, leave a comment, like, share, follow, all of those things. We love to connect.
Great.
Yeah.
Any last thought you want to leave our viewers or listeners with before we wrap up?
Yeah. My other thing that I don't know how I forgot, but I do have a prayer call that I do every night, Monday through Friday from 9 to 9:30. And I guess you guys can put the dial-in number in your comments. I don't have that at the ready.
We can do that.
You can dial in from wherever you are, in your car, on your job, anywhere at 9 o'clock, and there is prayer for a half an hour, and we're praying for anything, everything. We have that. You can leave your prayer request on my website, and that's faithwalklifetalk.com. My parting thought is for those who are trying to navigate grief. Find your purpose in it. We have never asked for this, especially those who've lost children. We are in a community that we've never asked for. But since we're here, what are we going to do with this space? We're not going to shrivel up in a corner, but we're going to magnify the lives that were lost in our lives and make sure that there's an everlasting impression of that person that you lost, that when people come in contact with you, that their memory lives on forever. And even after you're gone, that their memory continues to live on. Grief is not an easy journey, but it's a doable journey.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. So that being said, our wrap up is just like Empress said over here. Make sure you view us,
follow, subscribe,
follow,
comment.
Yep. Remember that if you subscribe, you will know when there are new episodes, which helps you and it helps our podcast.
Yes.
So just to remind you who we are, I'm Stacy.
And I'm Heather.
And this was Why Do People Do That? We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Why Do People Do That was recorded and produced by Press Record Studios.